never thought I'd be the kind of person to share a story like this. I always figured home intrusion stories were the kind of thing that happened to other people who lived in sketchy neighborhoods, or who left their doors unlocked, or who just had bad luck. But I was wrong. I live in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where people wave to each other from their driveways, and the most exciting thing that usually happens is a lost dog poster going up on a telephone pole. I'm in my early 30s, single, and I've been renting this house for about a year and a half. It's nothing fancy, but it's comfortable, and I'd finally started to feel like it was really mine. I had my routines: morning coffee on the back porch, late night movies in the living room, the occasional dinner party with friends. I felt safe here. That's what makes what happened so hard to process. It was a Thursday night, just after 11. I just finished brushing my teeth and was about to turn off the lights when I heard a sound that didn't belong. A heavy, insistent pounding on my front door. Not a knock, not someone politely asking for help. This was the kind of pounding that makes your heart jump into your throat, the kind that makes you freeze in place and listen just to make sure you really heard it. I stood there for a second, trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a branch blown against the door by the wind. But then it came again, louder, more desperate. I crept to the window, careful to stay out of sight, and tried to see who was out there. The porch light was on, but it barely lit up the step, and all I could make out was a shadowy figure shifting from foot to foot. I'm not a small guy, and I don't scare easily, but something about the way this person was moving set off every alarm bell in my head. I considered calling the police right then, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to open the door, just a crack, with the chain still on, so I could see what was going on. The second I opened the door, even with the chain in place, the energy in the air changed. The man on my porch was maybe in his late 30s, but it was hard to tell. His hair was wild, his clothes rumpled and dirty, and his eyes darted around like he was searching for something only he could see. He didn't look homeless, exactly, but he didn't look like he belonged in this neighborhood either. He leaned in close, so close I could smell the sweat and something sour on his breath, and started talking fast, his words tumbling over each other. "You need to let me in. This is my house. You're not supposed to be here." His voice was low but urgent, and there was a tremor in it that made my skin crawl. I tried to keep my own voice steady as I told him he had the wrong place, that I'd been living here for over a year, that maybe he was confused, but he just shook his head, more agitated now, and started rattling off details about the house, details he shouldn't have known. He described the weird creak in the hallway floorboards, the way the bathroom door sticks if you don't lift it just right, even the chipped tile behind the stove that I'd always meant to fix. My heart started pounding for a different reason. I asked him how he knew all that, but he ignored me, pulling a battered folder from his jacket and shoving it through the gap in the door. Inside were papers, what looked like an old lease agreement, some mail addressed to him at my address, even a few faded photographs of him standing in what was unmistakably my living room. The photos looked old, but the furniture was the same, and the paint color on the walls matte. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was this some elaborate scam, or was I the one losing my grip on reality? I told him I was calling the police, and that's when everything changed. The moment I mentioned the police, his whole demeanor shifted. The wildness in his eyes faded, replaced by something cold and calculating. He straightened up, took a step back, and for a second I thought he might run. But instead, he just stared at me through the crack in the door, his breathing slowing, his voice suddenly calm. "Go ahead," he said, almost whispering. "Call them. I'll wait right here." There was something about the way he said it that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a threat, exactly, but it wasn't reassurance either. It was like he knew something I didn't, like he was in on a secret I was never supposed to discover. I closed the door, locked it, and immediately dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I watched him through the peephole as I spoke to the dispatcher, and he just stood there, perfectly still, staring at the door. When the police finally arrived, maybe 10 minutes later, he was gone. Vanished. No sign of him anywhere. The officers did a quick sweep of the yard, asked me a few questions, and told me it was probably just a confused vagrant or someone high on something. They said I should keep my doors locked and call again if he came back. I tried to explain about the photos, the lease, and the details he knew, but they didn't seem interested. To them, it was just another late night call in a quiet neighborhood. After they left, I sat in the living room for a long time, staring at the folder he'd left behind. The papers looked real, but the dates didn't make sense. The photos were old, but not that old. I started to wonder if I'd missed something, if there was some piece of the puzzle I wasn't seeing. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound, convinced he was still out there, watching, waiting for another chance to come back. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and second guessing. Every time I heard a car car slow down outside or footsteps on the sidewalk, my heart would race. I kept replaying the encounter in my head, trying to make sense of it. Was he really just confused, or was there something more sinister going on? I called my landlord and told him everything. He sounded genuinely surprised and promised to look into the house history, but he didn't have any answers for me. I even tried reaching out to the previous tenants, but none of them recognized the man from the photos or had ever experienced anything like this. For a while, things seemed to settle down. I started to convince myself it was over, that maybe he'd realized his mistake and moved on. But that uneasy feeling never really left. I started double-checking the locks every night, keeping the curtains drawn, and leaving a light on in every room. I even bought a security camera for the front porch, just in case. Then, about 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find my front door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I knew I'd locked it that morning. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, calling out, but the house was silent. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but as I walked from room to room, I realized things had been moved. Subtle things, like a chair pulled out from the table, a picture frame turned face down, a glass left on the counter that I didn't remember using. It wasn't a robbery. Nothing was missing, but someone had definitely been inside. I checked the security footage, but there was nothing, just hours of empty porch. The camera never triggered. That night, I barely slept, every creak and groan of the house amplified by my nerves. I kept thinking about the man, about the way he'd looked at me, about the folder of evidence he'd left behind. I started to wonder if he'd ever really left at all, or if he was just waiting for the right moment to come back. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but the truth is, I still don't know if it ever really ended. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. I lay frozen, barely breathing, listening as they stopped right outside my bedroom door. The handle turned, but the lock held. I waited, heart pounding, until the footsteps retreated and the house fell silent again. When I finally worked up the courage to check, there was nothing there. No sign of forced entry, no evidence anyone had been inside. But on the kitchen table, right where I'd see it, was a single photograph. Me, asleep in my own bed, taken from inside my room. I moved out the next day. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he's found someone new. If you ever hear footsteps where there shouldn't be any, don't ignore them. Thanks for listening to my story. If you made it this far, I hope you're double-checking your locks tonight. Real horror isn't always about ghosts or monsters. It's about the things that can happen in the places we feel safest. If you've ever experienced something you can't explain, or if you have your own home intrusion story, share it in the comments below. I read every single one, and you never know, your story might be featured in a future video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones that are real. Good night.